Hello. It is just me tonight, and it will just be me tonight, other than our guest, obviously. Me prattling on for 2 hours would be a little bit too much for everybody to bear. As usual, guys, give me a shout just to make sure you can actually see me and hear me properly, so I'm not talking away to myself. I don't think we've got Dave Fackerson on tonight, and usually he's the first person to tell me he can see me and hear me, so somebody else is going to have to spin for Dave Fackerson. And I've just seen that Ian Abernethy is ducking out because he's at the Metallica gig tonight. Well, if ever you need an excuse to duck out the Blether, I think that's it. I'm very jealous of that. That's very, very cool. We've got a couple of folk on already. We've got Willis. Nice to see you, Willis. He is on the Glenkinchie Tawny Port finish from Cadden Heads. That's a good one. We've got a white port on the go just now. A handful. It's really good. We've got Ed Friday as well. You were really early, Ed. You were tuned in from 7 o'clock. Hopefully you're still there. Although you might be in the garden. Helping with pet chickens. Oh, that sounds really nice, actually. Take us out so we can chat away to the chickens. Ed Friday, who's this? It is just Kat. It is just me. Mike sends his apologies. He is working tonight. So he was going to try and jump into the chat, but the tasting he was doing has started a bit earlier than he originally thought. So he's not going to be able to join us tonight, unfortunately, but we will work away without him. We did miss last week. Mike's guest unfortunately couldn't make it, and I was working down at the Royal Highland Show along with our guest, who I met for the first time down there after stalking him on LinkedIn and making him agree to join us on the Blether. We've got Sugar Kitty here as well. Let me know what's in your glass tonight, everyone, or if anyone is drinking whiskey tonight. I know that a lot of people don't like to drink whiskey when it's hot outside. So let me know your views on that. Let me know if you've got whiskey, if you have got a cocktail, if you've got a cold beer. Oh, we've got Callum on as well. So I do have a whiskey tonight. Obviously, we've got a guest on from Glenkinchie, which I've never had before. I don't actually own a Glenkinchie, which I probably should have done when I went to go and speak to our guest at his stand. But of course, I fell in love with this. We've got a Klein Leash, and look at that label, a little shiny cat on it. So I had to have that one, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So that's what I've got tonight. Right. Without further ado, we're going to get our guest on. We've got John Johnstone of Glenkinchie Distillery, and we are going to find out a little bit more about him if I can make the magic of the connection work. There he is. Hello.
Hiya.
Welcome to the Blether. I was just saying to John in the chat, actually, everyone, I do have my windows open because it's for Scotland. This is stupidly hot. If it does sound really loud, you can hear all the cars going past. Give me a shout in the comments and I'll go and do something about it. But yeah, it's too hot for Scottish people. I don't mind the summer, but going from like wearing your jumper and jacket to straight on, 28 degrees in Aberdeen, we need somewhere in the middle somewhere, I think. It's a bit much. But we shouldn't complain. So let's get straight into it. We've just got a few more people joining the chat. Callum is on, of course, Callum, stick to form, Glen Scotia, Unlocked, Hidden Reserve, Andalusian. Wow, that's quite a name for a whiskey. I haven't heard that one. And Miss McKendrick is having a dram of Ardrey. It does seem appropriate for this heat. But anyway, we should say hello to our guest. We've got John Johnstone of Glenkinchie. It's so nice to have you on. Like I say, met you officially for the first time. What did you come over to Edinburgh or over to Ingliston?
I was there Friday and Saturday.
Friday. It was quite. So we were both over at the Royal Highland Show last week. My first time working. I've been once before as a punter, but oh my goodness, that's quite an intense show. Is that the first time you've done that, or do you do it every year?
No, I was there a few years ago, but generally speaking, that's the first time I've been for quite a while. And it had changed, for me anyway, but again, I really quite enjoyed it, meeting loads of different people. I'll tell you a story about this guy, pretty well dressed, comes up, being in his 50s, swept back here, says, he wanted to try a Lagavulin, and I gave him a Lagavulin. I said, where's your accent from? He says, New Zealand. I said, oh, really? I says, I've been to New Zealand. I says, when I went to New Zealand, I says, I came across more Angus's and Hamishes than I've come across in Scotland. I said, I'm the High Commissioner. I says, okay. He says, what's your name? Hamish. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah, you know yourself. On that type of thing, you meet all different types of people from everywhere and all generations.
Yeah, no, definitely. My cousin in New Zealand is called Hamish. So there you go. There's a lot of Hamishes out there. But you can imagine like Scottish people when they go out to New Zealand, it's just like Scotland, but on a grand scale. So you can see them settling in well there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, really, really interesting show. And I think they were saying that it had like a record attendance. So, I mean, yeah, the intensity of that, just talking, like you just, it's you kind of go into autopilot and you just kind of, your brain sort of doesn't keep up with your mouth and you just end up talking absolute nonsense. And before the comments come in, yes, I know that pretty much is me every single week, but this was on a much larger scale. But yeah, good fun, a good experience. It just took a few days to catch up afterwards. But talking of whiskey and what you do, let's find out a little bit more about you. So I spotted you on LinkedIn because you had shared a really interesting kind of release that you'd been part of at Glenkinchie. And so we're going to talk about that in a minute because it's really cool. But let's go back before that and find out your whiskey journey, quote unquote, what you did before, how you got into whiskey, and what you do as part of your role at Glenkinchie. I'm going to hand over to you.
I guess my whiskey journey started like a lot of people in Scotland when I was a teenager. I drank a half bottle of a cheap blend, and I wasn't able to smell whiskey even for the next 40 years. As a working career, I started as an apprentice engineer in BT in 1971, and eventually left BT after 40 years. At that point, I didn't have any real sort of interest in whiskey. My son was in the whiskey industry, and he says, look, I'm taking some American friends up to Speyside. Do you fancy coming along? I said, sure. So I went along, and some people might know my son, Craig Johnstone, who has worked for different distilleries. He's made whiskey in Tasmania and different places. So I went along on this trip, and the first distillery we visited was Glenfarclas. And I tried Glenfarclas, and the whiskies there I just thought were absolutely amazing. So that kind of got me into single malts. We visited Cardew, we did 2 or 3 distilleries on Speyside, and then coming back, he says there's a job advertised at Glenkinchie as a tour guide. Would you fancy? You should apply for it. I said, okay. So I did, and lo and behold, by sheer luck, I got the job there, and that was 2012. Now, as family connections are concerned, and Glenkinchie, my uncle's name was Eddie Christie. Eddie Christie he was married on my auntie Lizzie Johnston, and the Christies go back to Glenkinchie 5 generations. So I guess you could say I've got a kind of a dotted line to the distillery back to those days. And in the mid-1980s, when Glenkinchie first opened a proper visitor centre as part of Classic Malts, my big sister Mary, she was first manager of the visitor centre. And it was her that took on my son Craig, who was a student at the time, or 20 years later, as a guide. He got his degree, but he decided to want to work in whiskey. So he ended up in the whiskey industry and is still there as well. So like I say, I started as a guide in early 2012. 2014, the manager at the time, guy Scott Snedden, who now works at Inchcairn, was saying, he said, look, we're looking for what they called a super sub, and that was somebody to cover shifts on production when somebody goes off long-term sick. Would you fancy doing that? And I said, okay. I did that for a few months, and then when that ended, I was back onto the guiding again. And I've been doing that since, as I say, 2012. And the job that I do, as you know yourself, being a tour guide, it's just good fun. And you get lots of nonsense going on around in the world that you find kind of depressing. And then you get people come to the distillery from many countries, and you stare people, you eyeball people, and you realise so many good people out there. This is just such a fun industry to work in. And as far as it raises your respect for the human race. So as far as the job's concerned, there is no downside. Yeah. Now, the other thing I might say, I don't know whether this is interesting or not, but when I left BT, I decided that whatever I did next, I was going to travel either on my feet or on a bicycle. So since 2012, I was running to my work for a while, which is about 10 kilometres, and now I cycle to my work. And the cycling journey is a little bit longer, it's about 13 kilometres. So rain or shine, snow, whatever, I make my way to my work either on a bike or on my feet.
Is that, yeah, you just decided you're not going to take a job unless you could run or cycle to your work. That's amazing. I bet you're the better off for it health-wise.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm still happy doing what I do, and I've still managed to do that 26 kilometre round trip on a daily basis. And my wife always says to me, so when you got to give up work, I says there'll be two things that might affect me going to my work. I says, one, when I forget how to get there, and two, when I've got to buy an electric bicycle. That might be the second thing that's stopping me from working a bike.
I saw a photograph you posted on, must be your LinkedIn, and there's you drying all your cycling clothes along the still, which is Stillhouse, a great place to get your washing dried.
To be honest, at that time there was no clothes dryer. There is one now, but there was no clothes dryer. But this was on a night shift, and I realised that management might take a bit of a dim view even back in those days. So, but like I said, I just thought this was good fun. These big kettles, red hot, fantastic for drying clothes. So yeah, and you know, when you'd cycle up in the pouring rain, and I'd think, how am I going to dry my clothes? Well, that'll do. So yeah.
Do you know, that's the difference between a Lowlands city-based distillery and an Aberdeenshire Teuchter-based distillery. I've been up in Stillhouse a few times and found a wee Suki lamb in a little plastic bucket sitting next to our still, kind of warming up from hypothermia. So yeah.
Do you know what? When I used to, so we at Glenkinchie's got a bio plant, and we've got 5 lagoons beyond the distillery, where we treat the processed water before we can put it back in the burn. So we have got to cool the water down before it goes back in the burn. And when I was cycling up there on a shift, and it was raining, I couldn't take a step without standing on a frog, a toad, a newt. The whole place came alive, you know what I mean? So, and they used to get caught in the bio plant, get the odd chop up now and again. But as I say, yeah, it was. You know, the bio plant or the lagoons have got their own ecosystem with ducks, with deer, all sorts of wildlife, buzzards and everything. You know what I mean? So it's quite amazing, yeah.
Before we chat about that, I'm just going to say a few people know your son. So Paul McKendrick, who is my partner, my boyfriend, he knows Craig from his Scotch Malt Whisky Society days. So he's known him for a wee bit through that.
Yeah, that's going back a few years now, but yes, Craig did work in the Scotch Malt Whisky Society Eventually, as I say, he stayed there for quite a while, and then I think it was after that. I'm not sure if it was Bruichladdich after that. But as I say, eventually, for about 7 or 8 years, he was distilling in Tasmania. And then he came back here to work for the Macallan, but now he's working for the Australian Whisky Club. But he's based in Glasgow now.
Okay, that's it. That's a quite impressive career, because Tasmania, they've got such a pronounced kind of well-known whiskey industry. Like, they make some really good liquid out there, don't they?
So he worked for Lark, which is the oldest distillery in Tasmania. But yeah, and that's really where he learned, where he picked up his knowledge, was in Tasmania, because small distillery can basically experiment. And yeah, he picked up, he did everything there, you know what I mean, from the entire process to putting the whiskies together. So it taught him a great deal. So what I'm saying is, although Scotland, we've got a great whisky industry, it doesn't mean to say that you can't go to another country and learn something there. You know what I mean? They can be a bit more experimental than what we can here, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We've got our regular Rick Johnson, who tunes in from, and I know you just told me where you're based, Rick, and I know I should remember where you are every time you tell me. Is it California? Maybe I can't. That's terrible. I've forgotten. San Francisco, not even close. Sorry, Rick. But he was saying that he met you on a tour with the British Society of Flavorists. He said you've got a great sense of humour.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sometimes I wonder if my humour works, if it translates to other cultures and accents. The first thing I say in my tour nowadays, you know what I mean? If I speak too quickly, please tell me to slow down. Some people have got trouble with the local accent, and the only thing I say is, by the time you've had one whiskey, you probably won't care what I'm saying, and by the time you've had 3 whiskies, you'll be talking exactly the same as me. So language will not be a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. When I was working at the Highland Show the other day, there, the amount of people that, and I get this a lot, the amount of people that say to me, "You don't sound like you're from Aberdeenshire." And I did move away for over 10 years and have picked up quite a different accent. But I think when you work with members of the public, and especially people who've got English as a second language, I think you learn, because Aberdeenshire, you'll know, we talk fast up there. So I think you do learn to adapt how quickly you talk, how you enunciate, and the language you use, and you kind of find yourself using more like hand gestures and stuff just to help people understand, because British people, we've not been very good at picking up a second language, so like you kind of try your best to make it easy for people, make them feel welcome, and without dumbing it down.
Absolutely. So yeah, that was my.
All my chats just jumped right up the screen. Sorry.
So that was a kind of just.
Sorry, keep going. There's a delay. There's a delay between.
That was a shortened version of my entire working career. So yeah, and like I say, I still. I'm now working maybe between 3 and 4 days a week, so I don't work a full week any longer. It's usually Wednesday to Friday, and every third weekend. I'm of an age now where I'm slowing down a little bit. So, but then the other thing is, I've now got yesterday a grandchild number 7 arrived in Forfar. So Monday, my wife and I babysit one grandchild that lives locally. Tuesday, I'm through to Glasgow for another 3, and then we have to make occasional trips to Forfar to see the ones we've got there. So, yeah, no complaints about life.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a lot of grandkiddies to help look after.
Cost me a fortune.
That's lovely. But you'll love it, I'm sure. Going back to what you mentioned about the bio plant you've got, and like the sort of lagoons and things, I was reading a little bit about Glenkinchie in the Bible that we all know and love. And it's
Okay.
kind of talking about Diageo, kind of call it the garden distillery, and how beautiful kind of that region is. The fact you've got like bees. Is this where you had your inspiration for the Swallows series? Like it's called the, what was
Do
it
you know,
called?
the Richness of Swallows, the Richness of Swallows
Yes.
it's the oldest whisky, as far as I'm aware, that Glenkinchie has been brought out in 30 years. Do you know, it's funny because, as I say, cycling will work all the year round. Things are quite seasonal, eh? You know, I see, because like where I live in East Lothian, it is rural, agricultural country, same as Aberdeenshire to a certain extent. And you know, I always think people say you're quite difficult to get to. I say, but you know, we were built here to make whisky. The tourist thing came along later, but we do appreciate people coming out to see us, and we realise it's a bit of a challenge to reach us. But going back to the point, cycling to work, I do see the change in the seasons, and I always, going back to how I started with the Swallow, the very first time, I have worked in a couple of other distilleries. I worked at Lagavulin during the Fesh, Lagavulin and Killua during the Fesh in 2016. And in the old yeast house at Lagavulin, swallows were nesting, and somebody had put up a fake hawk to try and discourage the swallows. And the swallows were just landing on the hawk and using it as a kind of, you know, just a bit of a landing point. So with distillers and swallows kind of came together. But as far as that side of the story is concerned, and this takes place about 6 years ago, it was just probably after COVID, around about COVID time. And like I say, I had a bit other issues that involved with health, which I won't bother touching on. But so I did have an attachment to swallows for another reason. But I was walking up from the distillery to their warehouse, and in front of me was Glenkinchie's tall, 100-foot tall red brick chimney. And this was roughly about this time of year. And flying through this chimney, I saw these little swallows, and above them there was swifts, and round about there was house martins and that as well, all in the same families, you know. And you know, the thing that always surprises me with swallows is they've got this kind of lust for life. They fly through there showing such joy. And beyond the chimney, there was barley fields. At this time of year, as you can imagine, the vibrant green colour spring barley, and beyond that there's a Lammermuir. That's nowadays Lammermuir Hills. Nowadays that's where we get our water from at Glenkinchie. We still use the Kinchie Bun for condensing, but we get our water from a spring in the hills. And then, you know, looking at these little birds, I just thought to myself, you know, a few weeks before, they just made this epic journey from Southern Africa to Scotland. And swallows, the hardier ones, they always come back to where they were born, sometimes even using the same nest. And I thought to myself, you know, a few weeks before, they've just come through, crossed 2 continents, flying over all different terrains, flying over desert, mountains, oceans, jungle, 5-week journey, sometimes sleeping on the wing, trying to avoid predators. Climate change, every year the storms get worse. So it's a really difficult journey, and the numbers are decreasing for sure. And then I thought, you know, wouldn't it be, when you think about the journey, they're flying over at that point, they're coming over Spain, they're coming over vineyards where they grow grapes, they're flying over bodegas where they make sherry, they're flying over forests where we get oak from for our barrels, and then they come home and settle at home in the barley fields. And I just thought, imagine a swallow, you've just come the 6,000 miles from Southern Africa, you're on the Lammermuir Hills, you're looking for home, and swallows, they reckon, use markers, and you're flying across all these green fields, looking for a sign of home. Then all of a sudden, you see Glenkinchie's big red chimney, like a giant beacon, and you think to yourself, I've made it, I'm home. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to represent that epic journey with a whiskey expression. So I put this idea into my boss at the time, and she said, I'm not sure if guides actually come up with ideas for whiskey expressions, but I'm going to send this forward anyway. So she sent it forward, and here we are, 6 years later. It's been released, and I can't tell you how delighted I am with the fact that this release has come out, and courtesy of an idea that I've come up with. You know what I mean? So, yeah, how proud could I be? Yeah, brilliant. And we had a launch night for the release and stuff like that, and there was a bit of media attention and so on and so forth. So I just thought the story is quite nice, and I'm really pleased at the way that the story has been represented. And you know, every step of that journey, every step of the journey that took place, like there was a company called Blue Box based in Stirling, they did the packaging. And for every package that's put together for this whiskey, there's 13 little pieces go to make the box. So I went along to Blue Box, and there's these people all putting the boxes together, and the manager says to me, he says, would you mind telling the people the story about the bottle and what's behind it? And, you know, these people obviously come into their work every day and do their job. But when I told them the story and they got the story behind the bottle, the room came alive. You know, it was almost like there was so much energy. It was almost like there was souls in the room. So it was fantastic. And then I went to see the bottling. And as I say, you've got the guys putting the gold leaf on the bottle and stuff like that. And again, I told them the story. And again, it was exactly the same thing. So, do you know what I mean? It just created so much energy. So I'm totally blown away by the whole thing. So, yeah, fantastic. Hello, Kat. Can you hear me okay?
Oh my gosh. Right. Am I back, guys? Can you hear me okay?
I thought you dropped off listening to me there, Kat.
Oh, no. Oh, no, I'm having such bad internet problems. It just keeps freezing. A couple of guys have messaged to say freezing.
And then
it just ducked out. I know I'm having really, really bad internet problems, guys. I'm really struggling picking out what you're saying at all, John. I think we might have to. We'll keep going and see how it goes. But if you, if you can't hear me, just carry on. I'll just try not to look too badly frozen.
I can hear you.
What bad luck that Mike's not here and my internet actually dies completely. Okay, that's good. I was panicking, like the whole thing just closed down. I was trying to get it to hotspot instead. And I was like, oh my gosh, poor John's just stuck there and talking away while I'm frozen like an idiot. Right. I did hear most of that beautiful story as well. But yeah, you're right about swallows and distilleries. We have them that come to Glenkinchie as well, and we have a local swallow group that come and check on them every year to see
Oh,
how
really?
many came back, and to make sure that we haven't put anything against the wall. Yeah, they kind of make sure we haven't put anything against the walls, and they give us advice about if we were getting work done, for example. They'd say, please don't put the scaffolding there, if you just move it over there. So of course, we to that as well.
I'm delighted
There
there
goes
are
the internet
people
again.
that are so interested in nature. I'm delighted there are people that are so interested in nature that do that type of thing. So the other thing I was going to say, just to kind of complete this bit off, was, my three passions, or, well, other than outside family, but three of my big passions in life are Glenkinchie Distillery, where I work, and the people that work there, whisky, any type of whisky, and then Mother Nature. And this bottling of the 30-year-old has really just been my three main passions distilled and condensed, stuck into a bottle. And as I say, that's just the crowning point of my whisky career, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very similar. I love nature. I moved over here. I was farming for 10 years before whiskey, so to me, like, the sort of the wheel of the years is just as important as the sort of the cycle of whiskey making as well. And quite often, whiskey and farming have been linked. I mean, they were always linked. There's usually farmers that made whiskey, so I love how that connection always finds a way back to itself. I'm going to ask you a question that comes across every week from Callum, and hopefully by the time you've answered it, my internet will caught up with itself. So Callum, and I'm going to give you a little hint about one of the answers he's going to want from you. Callum's handle is called Glen Scotia Whiskey, but don't let that influence you. So Callum asks every week, what's your favourite distilleries from each of the 5 regions? Highlands, Lowlands, Speyside, Campbellton, Islay.
So Islay, that's a hard one. There's so many. I visited Islay a few times, and I've got to say, I like the kind of the atmosphere on most of the distilleries. I did like the Holy Trinity. The three of them. Working at Lagavulin was just a joy, and also the view that you get from the Stillhouse window at Kalila across the Paps of Jura is absolutely amazing. I loved the whole process at Bowmore, Kilhoman, what they did, and Bunnahabhain again. I loved that as well. So it's a very difficult. It's a bit like trying to say what's your favourite whisky. When we talk about distilleries, it's a mood thing. You know what I mean? But like when I did visit Islay, I don't think there's a whisky distillery that I didn't enjoy the visit to, and each one had its own strengths as far as the different parts of the process and stuff like that. So yeah, I quite like them all. I did visit Campbellton. Unfortunately, I didn't get to Glen Scotia. I did see at that time. I did go to Springbank and Glengyle. I really enjoyed that as well. What they did there. Highland distilleries. Let me have a wee think about that. So, as far as locations are concerned, Dalwhinnie does take a bit of beating when you see where it's located. And then I quite enjoyed going further up north as well. Not just purely Diageo distilleries. We did Glenmorangie, which I quite enjoyed the visit up there as well. To be honest, I probably haven't done some of the Highland distilleries proper justice. I did over the past few weeks. I went with my son Craig. We did visit Rassie Distillery, and I really enjoyed seeing what they did there. And they're small, creative, imaginative in their approach. So I really did enjoy the visit to Diageo Distillery fairly recently. Speyside, again, that's a difficult one. There's so many that you could choose from. To be fair, if I go back to my very original point where I did start drinking single malts again, I did enjoy the visit to Glenfarclas. That was really quite nice. Lowlands, do you know, Auchentoshan, and to be fair, I haven't really been to any of the Edinburgh distilleries for my sins, my closest distilleries, and I did. I've got to be quite biased here. I do like where I work and what we do at Glenkinchie. But yeah, the visit to Auchentoshan again was really quite nice. So I love them all, and I think that we learn, or we can learn so much from each other. And I know that we're all in competition, but I do think this is really quite a cooperative industry, and we do all learn from each other. So I do like going around other distilleries, seeing what they do. So yeah, that was a hard question, Callum. I apologise for giving you a fudged answer.
I mean, it's difficult because there are so many, and you're judging them on lots of different things, like location, like great tour you had, like I really enjoyed that dram. So yeah, it's quite hard to nail down favourites. As long as you say Glen Scotia, generally Callum's happy, so it's all good. In terms of working for Diageo,
I was going to say, I do promise I will come and visit Glen Scotia in the not too distant future. Probably next year, I will come down and see you at Glen Scotia. That's a promise. Hold me to it.
Yeah, that's it. It's official now. It's on the Blether. It's that we'll have to make it happen. In terms of like working for Diageo, I'm always so impressed. Like your stand, for example, at the Highland Show, any visitor centre I've gone to that's Diageo, the range of expressions you have there from all your other sites, or from a broad spectrum of your other sites, is really, really impressive. And you guys, all your VC staff, you know so much about your other brands. Is that part of like sort of initial visitor centre training? Is it something that you can volunteer to kind of develop on? What does that look like on your side?
There's no proper formal training. There might be some write-ups, but it's really down to the individual guide. And we've just got a couple of new people that have started fairly recently. And again, it's really just a case of other guides taking them through the different whiskies and the style of whiskies. So there's no real formal training in that respect. It's really just a case of how interested the individual is in picking up their whisky knowledge. And I'll be completely honest, you'll probably have the same at Glengarry. We've got people in the team at the visitor centre who don't like whisky, the taste of whisky, but can actually talk about the different characteristics of different whiskies. So it's really down to the individual as to how involved they want to get as far as understanding the different whiskies. And again, we don't limit that. Some of your guys, like we've got a big guy, John Blythe, who has just got such a knowledge of expressions from any distillery, from the knowledge within the team. And again, there's probably an age thing here as well. And people going out to whisky festivals and doing different things, visiting distilleries. So there is quite an extensive range of knowledge which people are quite happy to share, have a chat about, which I think is quite healthy.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of styles, we were talking about Lowlands, and in fact, you love Auchentoshan, which is fab. I think some whiskies are quite maybe not distinct, characteristic of traditional regional styles. Yeah. But I was reading about your production at Glenkinchie. So like in theory, you should be quite classic Lowlands, because you've got long fermentations, you've got clear wort, so you should be making this really fruity, light, estery whiskey. But you've got like an angular line arm and worm tubs. So like, is that not like a contrast of two styles? How does that marry together in your new make spinner?
if I'm brutally honest, Glenkinchie was basically probably going back to the later origins when we opened in the 1870s, when blending was massive. We were probably considered most of all to be a house for producing whiskey for blending, and the blenders still like Glenkinchie because, and it's primarily down to the worm tub, and it gives it a meaty character. So although we've got big stills and a wide girth on the stills, which basically allows so much to pass through the wash still, I think that meatiness and character comes from the worm tub. It's funny because I'd heard a story once. There was a guy called Charlie Smith, who I think it was Charlie Smith at the time, and this goes back to the early 2000s when Charlie was, I think he was operations manager at Glenkinchie at the time. And at that time we were making the 10-year-old, and the 10-year-old was quite grassy, a hint of smoke, and the 10-year-old was reasonably popular, but I think it was maybe a little bit, the character. What Charlie did was, Charlie, at that time, the classic malts was kicking off, so Charlie had to do a tasting in Paris, and as an experimentation, they took a 12-year-old along, and which, again, that 2 extra years in the cask, a part of the audience in Paris loved it. And my understanding is in 2007, I think it was, the decision was made to move from the 10-year-old to the 12-year-old. I still get people that come around the distillery that say that 10-year-old Glenkinchie was my favourite whisky at the time, etc., etc. You know what I mean? So I think that extra couple of years, although you've got a little bit of spice in it, I think it does lighten the character a bit. So I do. You're right. There is a kind of conflict in what you would imagine for being a very light lowland style, and as I say, the worm tub introduces a bit of an extra dimension to that.
Yeah, no, it is pretty cool to be honest. Cause I don't know, I just always associated Glenkinchie, because it's not one I've experimented with much. It's just been like light grassy floral, but I'm probably just falling into that mindset of like thinking about traditional lowlands, because there's not that many distilleries with worm tubs. So it's quite a cool, geeky little fact for people if they've never been before.
Joe, I'll tell you the other thing about Glenkinchie that is, some of the guys that are on this chat will probably know. One of the things that we've got, which is completely unique to the distillery, is we've got this model, which was a working model of a single malt distillery, 50 feet long. So you've got the entire process, from the traditional process of taking the barley into the distillery, and then malting, and then you've got a mill, you've got the old-fashioned mash tun, wooden fermenters, so right through to the whole process laid out in sequence. So right now, when we're in silent season, this is a fantastic resource to be able to take people right down through the process. And again, the model is now 103 years old, and there is nothing like it in any other distillery in the world. So you've got this whole process end to end, 50 feet long. It's really quite nice.
You know, I am so jealous of that, because silent season is it. I mean, we always kind of try and show people behind the scenes a little bit. We'll show them into areas like the kiln is below the kiln's open, for example, and you still have that same enthusiasm for it, but it can be quite a hard sell sometimes. You know, if people have been to distilleries before and they're expecting to see malt on the floor and stills bubbling away, but the fact you've got like a 50-foot model that you can just show people around. I would come on silent season just to see that. I would deliberately book on silent season just to come and see that. That's very cool.
The funny thing is that model is, as I say, it's just passive. It lies there, and I think it would be great to use a bit of technology. We had a Scottish guy who worked in Silicon Valley in California, and he said, you know, you could get a projector on the wall, and he could get the glass front. He could display the process of the model appearing to be working, and I think that is a fantastic idea, that I would love to try and explore with anybody who's technology minded.
Do you know, when we were into farming, I remember we went to, maybe it was the Royal Highland Show actually, and my kids were really small, and it was like remote controlled tractor competitions, and like they'd literally created like model farms for these adult men, mainly adult men, to drive these like kind of tractors around and kind of do all the wee jobs that like farmers do, but in miniature form. That'd be awesome if you just got like some little action figures and you could just head in and kind of play distillery for the day. I would love that.
But well, you know, that's the perfect size for a person in there would be, you could have Barbie and Ken, you know, sitting on top of the stills or whatever. I see a question about who made the model and when. It was made in 1923 by a company called Bassett Lowkey, who were they were the original sort of quality model makers, and each element of the model at the time was based on a lowland distillery in 1923. The still design at that time was based on Glenkinchie. Now, my understanding is that when Prohibition ended in 1933, Glenkinchie was the only one of these distilleries that was potentially still in existence. I can't verify that, but that's just a story I've heard.
That's very cool. I know that there was a model made of Glengarry during the late 60s into the 70s because we had a greenhouse project. So we changed from direct firing into indirect firing when North Sea gas became available. And we're producing too much heat. So we started pumping that into acres of greenhouses. And then Scotland kind of became, Scotland. Glengarry became the sort of first sustainable distillery in Scotland before anybody really cared about sustainability or knew what that meant. So a model was made of this with all the greenhouses and all the wee vines of tomatoes and whatever, and it was taken to Knoxville, Tennessee for like the World Fair.
Right.
But nobody knows where this model's gone. It was presented to, I think it was Margaret Thatcher at the time. Don't hold that against us. But she came and had a look at it and stuff. And but yeah, nobody knows where this model's ended up. And it'd be so nice to get it back if we could find it. It'd be awesome to have that to see what it looked like. But gone, I think.
So, you know, you're just talking about sustainability there, and that's quite interesting. John, one of the things I was looking at was when Glenkinchie was reconstructed after the 1870s. It started distilling again in the 1870s, reconstructed in about 1890. Now, at that time, it was a farm. So, like the distillery staff was about 30 people, and about 12 of them were involved, were on the malting floors, but you had ploughmen and you had horsemen. Now, it mostly grew its own barley, but again, it was local barley that was used. East Lothian was a big coal producing area, so they would use local anthracite. So they had a couple of Clydesdales, which took the full barrels to the railway station, which was a couple of miles away, and then brought back coal. So that the distillery workers at the time would spend maybe 6 months working in the distillery, and then the other 6 months would be on the farm. So you had this kind of circular economy that everybody talks about nowadays, which was kind of self-contained. They had a herd of Aberdeen Angus cattle, which were fed on the draft. Do you know what I mean? So the whole thing just, you know, was sustainable before sustainability became fashionable, you know?
Yeah, you're so right. Glengarry was the same. There was pigs that lived next to the car park. There, the cleaner also kept a milking cow, so she would go in and get the milk for the guys every morning. Ironically, she was called Mrs. Horn, which I absolutely love. And yeah, you had to have a knowledge of animal husbandry as well as know how to distill whiskey. So yeah, it's a lovely tie-in, a lovely sort of full circle moment between, as we said earlier, nature, farming, and distilling. It's it's nice.
The other thing was that although they're not on display, the Aberdeen Angus cattle, they were prize winners at different agricultural shows in Edinburgh, Smithfield in London, Birmingham, etc. We have got these 10 amazing silver cups, massive, that we don't put on display, which I think is such a crime because just to recognise. I know.
That would be awesome. We keep coming back to nature quite a bit, and I was thinking about your richness of swallows, and I wondered, with your four corners. I mean, question, like part one of that question is, do you find them a useful tool for what you guys are doing? Does it, with the whole Johnny Walker connection, do you find it's a good way of explaining to your visitors who you are and kind of what your brands are? And Carol, I'll give you the
I was just going to say that when they spent money on Glenkinchie, it's coming up 7 years ago now, and they took a warehouse that was basically difficult to use because it was on 4 floors, and they turned that into the visitor centre. So they did spend money. They brought a bit of technology into the visitor centre process, which is really quite fascinating as well. But the big thing for us, and I know that people have got different opinions about blends and about Johnny Walker and about big names and stuff like that. What I'd like to say is that basically, irrespective of how you look at it, Johnny Walker is a big brand, and we are a small regional distillery, totally unrecognised. I've got people, the closest town to us is Trinent, about 5 miles from the distillery. I could walk down the street of Trinent, the main street in Trinent, and ask people, have you heard of Glenkinchie? And I would guesstimate that maybe 50%, even locally, have not heard of us. So what I'm saying is, for us to cling on to the coattails of Johnny Walker, which is a big multinational brand, for a small regional distillery like us, it has undoubtedly raised our profile. And probably one of the biggest things, the biggest increase in visitors we had a couple of years ago was from India. Johnny Walker's got this massive name in India, and it's just strange that the number of visitors from India increased dramatically when that happened. So that it's like everything like this, it is a marketing project, and marketing projects come and go, and that with Clyde closing its visitor centre, there's no doubt that it's kind of taken a bit of a back seat. But for us, it still works.
Yeah, and I liked it. I did the Johnny Walker experience in Edinburgh.
The other thing I was going to say with that, Kat, is that we realise that we've got competition in Edinburgh now. You've got Portleaf Distillery, you've got Holyrood Distillery, but again, probably, and although it's part of the same company, Johnny Walker Princess Street, they're all drawing visitors from our potential. So, but as I say, I still see it as a competitive. Although the industry is competitive, it is very cooperative as well. And I wish success to everybody else that joins the whisky industry and tries to tell a good story and it gets on with what they do and do it well.
Yeah, I do agree with that. It's such a busy market, and for small distilleries like Glenkinchie, like Glengarry, like somebody mentioned Blether the other day, and every now and again this distillery will pop into your head. You're like, wait, why have I not tried that whiskey, or have I tried that whiskey? So sometimes you do just need a sort of a neon sign that points you down a path and say, this is why you like this. And I think the Four Corners does help with that, to be honest. I think it does it in like in Edinburgh, for example, the Johnny Walker experience kind of does it in a fun way. It does it in an approachable way. If you have come into Edinburgh and you just want to tick the box of the castle, Princess Street, and try some whiskey, it just makes whiskey a little bit more easy access, a little bit, especially if your only experience of whiskey in the US is maybe Glenlivet, Johnny Walker, Blue Label, and I don't know, Macallan. It is a bit of an education, but a fun education, and you're not being preached at for an hour about chemistry and pitch rates and gravity and maturation stats. So I see value in it. I do agree with what you're saying.
And I think undoubtedly the industry is trying to appeal to different generations, which I think the amount of feedback I get from youngsters, shall I say, of a different younger generation than me, who think that the Johnny Walker experience is wonderful. You know what I mean? So I don't see, again, anything particularly wrong in that. So, yeah.
Yeah. We're getting so much bird chat off the back of your swallows, which I absolutely love. Reb is in Israel, and he mentioned a bird called the hoopoe, which I don't think I know, but a few people seem to know these birds. Apparently, they make really weird noises. But it's made me. I kind of wanted you to denote a bird to each of the corners, right? So Glenkinchie is your swallows, but what's your birds for? If one of the other four corners could be a bird, what would it be? And people can put in suggestions at home too.
My suggestion for the birds for the four corners. Did you say?
Yeah, go for it. Put you on the
Yeah,
spot.
I suppose.
Yeah. You're on the spot.
Well, it's not one of the four corners. Khalil would probably be geese. You've got, I think, Isla's quite famous for goose migrations at certain times of the year. So I suppose a goose. Clynelish. So I'm trying to think of a bird that would be
like a northern bird.
Yeah, Clynelish isn't exactly on the coast, but and then Cardew, a typical Speyside bird.
Oh, so maybe like a pheasant. Yeah, pheasant would be quite good, or corncrake, because they come over in the springtime and hide in the barley. Would be quite good. I was looking at go on.
I was just going to say Clynelish, you're kind of a wee bit back from the coast, so it wouldn't be a puffin would be a great bird to associate with a whisky, but unfortunately maybe a wee bit maybe something like an oyster catcher. The oyster catchers tend to come away from the coast a bit, so something like that.
Yeah, oyster catcher would be good. I think Ed just said that apparently Inchgower was on the flora and fauna was an oyster catcher on their bottle, because they always have either like a wee animal or something on it.
It was,
yeah.
Yeah, cool. And some of the flora.
It's quite a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was looking at. On you go.
No, I was just going to say,
the internet delay is driving me insane.
Somebody's put a grey cat bird for Clynelish. What's that?
I don't know. So with the swallows, your richness in swallows is obviously a collective noun for swallows. So I was going to test you to see if you knew any other collective nouns for birds, because if anybody's watched before, they'll know that during COVID I got obsessed by collective nouns. So when I was eating my dinner quickly, hoofing it down my face, I went to go and get my wee book. And I thought, you're a man in the countryside, you like your bike, you like your nature. So I thought I'd give it a go. Bearing in mind, we've got a slight delay, so there's going to be a pause between me asking you and you replying, because my internet is obviously just not cooperating.
It could be a very big pause, actually, if I don't know the answer.
There's a prize at the end. You get to leave early because my internet's so shit. You get to bail out early. That's your prize if you win. So we'll give you the first one, and I think it's one most people will know. An unkindness. What kind of bird is that? And anybody else at home can play as well. I promise I'm not going to do too many.
It wouldn't be crows, would it?
It's close. It's ravens. Yeah, it's part of the same family, isn't it? So it makes sense.
Indeed.
So the next one along, and I like this one, a charm.
I've heard of this one, but I'm trying to think. Are they all British birds?
They're quite cute. It's goldfinches.
Oh, do you know, I was going to say some sort of finch, but yeah.
So a
Okay,
charm of gold.
that's a great one.
It's quite a nice one. This one, I think when you hear the answer, it sounds obvious, but it's maybe not until you hear the answer that you, yeah, it's a tiding of something. Think of the nursery rhyme you sing when you're a child about a certain bird.
Blackbird.
Nearly. It's magpies. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for girl, 4 for boy.
Good one. Yeah.
It makes sense when you hear about it. And I'll do one more just because I just like this. The last one is we'll go for an exaltation.
Gannets.
Oh, that's a really good guess, actually. I get where you're going with there because they are just all busy, kind of in your face. But it's actually larks. Skylarks. Yeah, Reb got it. It is skylarks. Although I also saw that you're on your Google Gemini, so maybe you just got in there quick with your Google.
Well done, Ray. Well done.
There is actually a really pretty name for skylarks in Aberdeenshire. We call them lavricks, which I always thought was a very, very pretty name for them. I don't know why we do, but they're just called lavricks up in Aberdeenshire. Must be an old Scots word, potentially, or Doric.
We've got streets locally called Carleverick, so it must have be the same thing.
Oh, yeah. No, it's cute. It's interesting, isn't it? You might get a whole series of kind of aged commercial Glenkinchies named after collective nouns of birds. I think we should make that happen, John. Let's get that down on paper now.
One thing that I'm quite aware of is that because now that Glenkinchie's got a bottle out, there's probably a dozen other Diageo distilleries that are all saying, we want that, we want a bottle. So do you know what I mean? So I think we will go back to we will go a bit further back in the queue for our next bottle, I guess. Probably beyond my time.
But at least you can say I was the inspiration for that. And you know what? It's recorded now. It's here for posterity's sake. We will all know that you are the man.
Listen, Kat, I had a guy in a couple of weeks ago from Santa Barbara who's a songwriter, and he says, would you mind if I penned a song about this story? I said, carry on.
Wow.
So I believe that he's written a song. I've never heard it. I've no idea what's the guy's name? Springsteen? Brian Springsteen? Only kidding. No, it's yeah, it's this guy's. He's written a song about this story. So, hey, well done him.
That's amazing. That's so cool. That's one of the lovely things about distilleries and especially working in visitor centres. And I wonder if you enjoy that more than your time in operations, or whether you can't really compare apples and pears. But you just never know who's going to walk through the door. And people want to share their stories because they're on holiday or they've made a pilgrimage to their favourite distillery. Every day is so unique.
Visitors are just oxygen. Do you know, although I did like working on the stills, I struggled with the night shift. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd come home in the morning, it's at 6:30 in the morning, and the world was just coming alive, and I'm trying to get to sleep, cursing. So I did find the night shift quite difficult, but the rest of it, I did enjoy working. That you talk about some of the best things that ever happened to you. See, like Glenkinchie's got the biggest wash still on mainland Scotland by capacity. And when I was standing there my first night shift on my own, watching this still boil, watching the foam going up to the windows, and then maybe 5 minutes later, the still coming in through the spirit safe, that, the fudge coloured beer is now clear. There's magic in the process. That was just one of the most amazing things I've ever done. And my son Craig was in the industry some years before me, and he still hates the fact that I was distilling before he ever did.
I know. I mean, that is lovely as well, though, because there's been inspiration there throughout your family, and just for your locality as well. And you're obviously very proud of him, and I'm sure he talks just as proudly of you when he's telling folks about his dad back up the road working at Glenkinchie, telling his stories. But I think that's it. Once you fall in love with the industry, you're very rarely going to find people that kind of fall out of love with it and leave. They usually just kind of work their way through the industry.
Yeah, it gets into your blood. I mean, when I first started at Glenkinchie, I didn't really have a huge amount of interest. It was just I started away, but now that I've been there, I do feel it's in my DNA now. You know what I mean? The place, the process, the whole industry. It's just such a great industry to work in. I love it.
It is. What do you think makes a good visitor centre assistant? Is it the storytelling? Is it the passion? Is it a mixture of everything, or is it that sort of magic that you can't quite describe? I think there's a bit. It's one of those jobs that it's really hard to describe. It's a little bit of everything. So I mean, I don't know how.
There is a bit of magic, which is indescribable. But as I say, the energy, the oxygen you get from meeting new people every day, taking them through the process in the distillery, and the whole thing. As I said, you hear about lots of nonsense going on in the world, and then you get people from many countries coming through the door. You eyeball them, you talk to them, and you realise there's so many good people out there. Just try and dump the negative stuff. Just talk to people as you find them, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, part of the whole magic of the industry that we're working. And again, having a nice dram as well is obviously part of that thing. And discovering new drams, yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. And if people haven't been to Glenkinchie before, what's the reason to head down? Obviously to come and see you. You're about 15 minutes out of Edinburgh, is that right? Or 50 miles, sorry.
So we're about 15 miles outside of Edinburgh. We are in the middle, as I say, we were built there to make whisky. So we can be quite difficult to get to. For anybody travelling to the distillery, people from the city will tend to take an Uber. The only issue we've got with Ubers, they won't come out and collect. So an Uber will drop you off at a fairly reasonable price. We can get local taxis to take you back. There is a local bus service. One of the bus services takes you to Harrington. Then you get another bus from Harrington to the distillery. That runs maybe 4 or 5 times a day. So there are public transport options. Some people get a bus to the village of Pencailland, which is about 40 minutes walk, and will walk up on nice days and stuff like that as well. So driving, taxis, public transport, there are options. And there are also some companies that will bring you down as part of an experience that you can get tickets from, etc., to take you down to the distillery. So hopefully there's a number of options for people to come and see us.
Definitely. Well, I'm just going to get Mr. McKendrick to drive me down next time I'm down the road, because Glasgow's not too far away from Edinburgh, not too far away from you, I'm sure. So he can take me over and I'll come and see this beautiful. It reminds me, I love what you said, reminds me of Glengarry. I feel like you guys are underrated. You do some really cool kind of distillation practices that not anybody else is doing. You're producing really good quality spirit. You're in this beautiful kind of rich agricultural area. It's all sounding very close to home. So I definitely have to come down and see you guys. I'll have to come in a day when you're not looking after grandchildren.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, usually, yeah. And it'd be great to see anybody that wants to come. We're accessible. The good thing, when we opened up again, when they did the upgrade, we've now got a bar. So we've got the bar. It does snacks, teas, coffees. It does beers, whiskies, some local beers made by a local brewery and stuff like that. So yeah, you can make a day out.
Definitely. We're going to look out for you. Reb is saying that he appreciates your words about take everyone as they come. And PX Woodhouse has just joined us and saying, loves Glenkinchie, bless the worm tobs. So yeah, such a draw for the Whisky Geeks. Reb's wife has just called you Glenkinchie, which is very cute. We might have to change the name or do a special release for there.
Listen,
Paul McKinnon
listen,
just said he's going to charge me double for getting a taxi.
we get Glenkinchie. We get STV News called us Glenkinchie. So, do you know what I mean? Do you know what? Kinchie comes
Oh
from.
my gosh.
Kinch is a contraction of the French name De Quincy. So the De Quincy's were landowners in the 14th century. So Kinchie, the Kinchie burn, Glenkinchie is just a contraction of De Quincy. Yeah.
Ah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, quite a few Scottish place names are from land that was gifted to Scottish landowners from the French during all the various historic troubles and back and forths we've had. But yeah, I mean, you guys are one of those ones I look at, like Auchentoshan potentially, and think nobody can get that wrong. But yeah, it sounds like people are definitely Glenkinchie might be my favorite one. I can sympathise with working at Glengarry and spending 4 days trying to describe to people that it was not called Glengarloch, which seemed to, this is a new one for me. I don't know what it was about the Royal Highland Show, but everyone was determined we were Glengarloch. I can relate. So yeah, it's not always easy, not always pronounced how it looks.
Indeed.
Well, I'm aware that we've had you for like an hour and nearly an hour and a half, and I'm aware my internet is so poor tonight. I can but apologise for that because I was so determined to hear the story about your swallows because I was so impressed that somebody in the visitor centre had been listened to by the giant that is Diageo and that was allowed to make this beautiful story and appreciation for nature into a brand story on the box. And I love the box. I love the glass. Yeah, you are such a natural storyteller as well. So I've really enjoyed the bits of it I could hear in between my terrible internet. So please come back and see us another time when I've paid the lecky bill and my internet works properly, or Aberdeenshire's found fibre optic.
Listen, thank you for having me, and I do appreciate people giving up their time to listen to me prattle on. So it's been a pleasure to join your call, and thank you very much for listening to me, or not, as the case may be. Yeah.
No, it's honestly been a pleasure. I would love to get you back on. If you stay there for a second, John, I'll just end the stream and then I'll just say a cheerio in the green room before we go and probably apologise again for my lack of internet. Guys, for next week is going to just be our last one for a couple of weeks before the summer holidays, just because we're aware that you guys are all probably going to start jetting off to lovely locations. And having to spend the afternoon or evenings in the gardens, which quite right too. So next week, I've finally managed to get somebody from the National Trust to join us to talk about these illicit stills that they found up in Perthshire, which I'm very, very excited about. Just waiting for confirmation from them. They've very, very kindly replied to my email and giving us their time. Just need to make sure we can get it all lined up. But like I say, next week will be our last one. So if you tune in for that, even if we can't get this gentleman on, we'll have a wee chat before summer holidays and Mike will be back on. So yeah, decide your farewell dram next week before we finish for a couple of weeks and we shall see you then. Thanks everyone for joining, and John, just stick there and